Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning in to the program. It's Tuesday, April the 30th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, who's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone to give us a shout in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So I don't know what the weather's like where you are listening from this morning, but certainly here in town it is socked in solid with the fog. Just a friendly reminder, sometimes we don't think about it in the daytime to engage our headlights, but then engages your taillights, but you really have to consider that today. It is really thick fog out there. All right, and in the world of travel, today is the day to take your studded tires off of your vehicle. So this is the deadline. People were allowed to put them on the 1st of November, and it ends today. So not only are you just going to scrub the stud off your tire if you continue to drive in these, bare conditions, but it's bad for the roads too. Well understood and documented what studded tires mean for the pavement. So today's the deadline. If you're caught with the tires on, you're in violation of the Highway Traffic Act. I'm not sure what the fine is, but why go down that path? So today's the day. Just a reminder for your studded tires. All right, for hockey fans, a lot of very worried Toronto Maple Leaf fans around. Now, there's 4 games on tap in the NHL playoffs tonight. All 4 are potential elimination games, including the Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins. Look, I'm not a Toronto fan, but I hope they beat the Bruins, to be honest with you, just so there's some more excitement circulating amongst my Toronto Maple Leaf buddies. But there they go. Some concerns whether or not the Rocket Richard Trophy winner, Austin Matthews, will be in the lineup tonight. He didn't practice yesterday, but who knows? Maintenance day, hopefully. Congratulations to the Newfoundland Rogues. They're off to the playoffs after a big win on Sunday against the London Lightning. Pretty top quality team, so the Rogues dig deep. They've got the KW Titans, the Kitchener-Waterloo Titans, in the first round, and hopefully there's a future for the Rogues at the Mary Brown Centre. You need that anchor tenant to down there, so good luck and go get him to the Rogues. A couple of quick baseball notes now that the Jays got one last night. So on this date, 1939, Lou Gehrig set the Major League record for playing his 2,130th consecutive and final game for the New York Yankees. And of course that record was eventually eclipsed by Cal Ripken Jr., who finished his illustrious career playing 2,632 consecutive games. And on this date, 1958, the splendid splinter, Ted Williams, is the 10th Major Leaguer to get 1,000 extra base hits. Wow. Hank Aaron, all-time leader with 1,477. Barry Bonds, 1,440. Albert Pujols, 1,405. And there's other players with 1,400 career base hits. Only 39 players all time have reached 1,000 career extra base hits. Okay. Hot topic in the House of Assembly yesterday, and rightfully so, are questions about access to mental health supports and talking about addictions. So we all know it's not that long ago we were using numbers like 1 in 5 Canadians have an issue with their mental well-being, they have a mental illness, and now we're using 1 in 4. So we go from crisis to crisis, and this is very real. So the government acknowledges there's more that needs to be done, and they can talk about like 811 and doorways and those types of programs. They're helpful. But what's absent inside of those go-to arenas is the continuity of care, which is extremely important. So while the federal government has cancelled things like Wellness Together, which does not necessarily offer the continuity of care either, there's just got to be a bit more attention to it. And then if you want to talk about mental health, long-term access, I'm more than happy to take it on. And your personal stories is what drives some of this. A lot of that stems from a protest outside a Carbonear Hospital, a mother desperately looking for support for her 15-year-old child. And so your stories really does add to the political need and will and want to do more on that front. Tony Wakeham, also the leader of the PCs yesterday, focusing in on addictions. All right, there's a lot to this. So the numbers across the country are absolutely staggering. And Mr. Wakem, based on access to information request, says that since 2019, there's been a 143% in overdose deaths. Now, what is not captured in that number is how many overdoses did not result in death. And so when asked, the government says things like ongoing education and utilizing mental health and addiction strategies into all the government departments, access to Narcan and what have you. Okay. Even if you are someone who thinks that you've created this problem for yourself by using drugs, now you're in the death spiral of addiction and the potential to overdose. What is not included in the conversation, and I don't know how many people are using and are just getting lucky by not overdosing, but it's the toxic nature of the drugs. I mean, it's a different batch of street drugs than years past. So even the presence of fentanyl, it's time for the criminal code to catch up here. Because this is a lethal substance. One tiny taste of it could drop you dead where you stand. And again, even if you think this is a problem people have created for themselves, we know full well the connection between drug use and serious drug use and crime. So again, this is bigger than just the folks who are dealing with addictions themselves and their families, and it's eroding families. It has been a huge issue in this province and across the country for years, and it's only getting worse. So education and Narcan, all important. But to deal with what's actually on the street and updating the criminal code to deal with drug dealers who are blending in fentanyl with whatever it is, cocaine we'll say, because that's a different set of circumstances than it was in years past. In some notable neighbourhoods, it's really quite saddening and frightening. People are turned into zombies. It's truly amazing stuff. So if you want to bring any of your concerns forward on the mental health issue and or addictions, and we'll add to it. You know, it's one thing and a good thing to build a new mental health and addictions facility on the health sciences complex. But of course, infrastructure just makes for more healthy, modern, comfortable surroundings, as opposed to meaningful changes, especially when we talk about two areas, continuity of care and long-term access. So let's talk about that if you're so inclined. This morning. And coming up right after the preamble, I believe the province's Privacy and Information Commissioner Michael Harvey is going to join us. His last day on the job here in this province is the 5th of May, and then he's taken his expertise to British Columbia. There's a most recent bit of work done by Mr. Harvey is talking about access to information to the Premier's office for the amount of money spent on travel for the Premier and Senior Advisor. So we'll let Mr. Harvey expand on exactly what's gone on here. But apparently the Premier's office has not been very forthcoming on this front, and he's recommending that they do more. Where's the downside here? Look, there's always going to be some travel where there can indeed be value for money spent. And it can indeed drum up business, and it may indeed be helpful in trying to recruit some healthcare professionals, whatever the case may be. But the fact of the matter is, when we're talking about taxpayers' money, there should be no reason available to any member of government to not disclose in full exactly what they've spent on travel for one trip or another. So we'll have Mr. Harvey on to talk about his time here in the province and this particular report, but simply recommending that a politician, whether it be the Premier or a minister or anybody working for the government, we need to know how you spend the money, period. It shouldn't even be a request. There should be automatic disclosure of exactly what's being spent on things like travel and per diems and all the rest of it. You want to talk about it? Let's go. Well, you've heard me talk about this issue in the past, and it has been a problem. When we talk about the amount of food that's wasted in this country year over year, we're talking millions of tons of food. Now, apparently, based on a new survey that's come out from the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, it looks like, and I would imagine it's as simple as the high grocery prices, that people are seemingly a bit more willing to ignore the best before date, and good on you. You know, in certain products, I still adhere to it, dairy, for instance. But for so many things we buy that are in the fridge or in the cupboard, the best before date is simply a recommendation. It's not an expiry date. Yes, maybe the caliber and the taste and the quality might not be what it was on day one when you purchased it, but it's not going to make you sick. Now, to educate yourself about food safety, of course, is important. But those best before dates, I mean, this is just marketing on behalf of the food companies. It just is. I mean, how many times have you said, oh, that expired, or pardon me, the best before date was a couple of days ago, but you eat it as best kind. So there's more people, and simply because of high grocery prices, that seems to be the root cause for people willing to move beyond the best before date, because, again, it's not the expiry date. Let's talk about that and anything else in the grocery stores. And one feature in many stores, probably too many stores, is the bloody self-checkout. Interestingly, so of course this was a bottom line concern for the big retailers, the Walmarts, the Giant Tigers, Canadian Tires, whatever. So they install a self-checkout. They save money because to put those machines in, and even with the maintenance required, the cost savings are obviously real. But what has been the result here is that people are frustrated. Some people just don't want to use a self-checkout. And more consequential for the retailer is the amount of theft. So apparently they call that in the industry, they refer to the theft as shrink. And the shrinkage, Mr. Costanza, is very real. So big outfits like Walmart, they're saying, well, the savings with not having a person at the register is being obliterated by the amount of merchandise that's being stolen. So it looks like some of the self-checkouts are going away, and good. Also a reminder, if you're stopped and anybody asks you for your receipt, unlike at Costco where you sign up as part of your membership to show them your receipt when you're trying to leave the store, but everywhere else, if someone asks to see your receipt and look in your bag, unless they have a legitimate reason to believe that you stole something, you don't owe them anything. You can ignore them and just walk out of the store. They have no right to hold you. They have no right to look in your bag. They have no right to look at your receipt. If they've got you on tape or someone has seen you actually put something in your pocket, the old 5-finger discount, other than that, you don't have to do anything for them. You don't have to show them anything. Let's talk about that. All right, now just a quick mention, and hopefully this doesn't become yet another reason why there's going to be a spike in the price of groceries, whether it be with chickens or beef or whatever the case may be. But the story coming from the United States regarding the outbreak of bird flu is very real. It's up to some 9 states at this moment in time. And of course, it's not just birds that could be impacted by the bird flu. It's been a huge problem inside the cattle ranchers in so many of these 9 states. And the border security trying to ensure that it doesn't make its way across into this country and impact our dairy or beef industry. But it's the chickens. Some 80 million chickens have been put down in the recent few days because of the bird flu. So when we hear and see these stories, like a couple of years ago when the bird flu absolutely exploded in North America, it did result in an awful lot of sickness, not necessarily to humans. There's only been 1 case in this country, for instance. But with so many birds impacted, you can control the borders all you like with the importation of beef and or poultry. But you can't do much with the birds that are actually flying across the border. The birds don't recognize any border security. So it has not impacted the Canadian industry at this moment in time, but there's always that possible potential, but they're apparently keeping a pretty close eye on it, and thankfully so. All right. I was talking to Jerry Lynn Mackey on the VOC Morning Show this morning. She had just spoke to Kevin Cody about the numbers of people vaping and the smoking and all the rest of it. And it just popped into my head, and we can talk about that. But I Googled up, when did the government decide they were going to sue Big Tobacco? And the result was a story post on the 8th of February of 2011, where the province said they were going to sue the big tobacco companies. So they passed something called the Tobacco Healthcare Cost Recovery Act in 2001. Roger Grimes was the premier at the time. So then there's quotes coming from then Health Minister Jerome Kennedy. He says, tobacco use cost the province several $100 million annually in both direct healthcare costs and indirect costs, including productivity loss due to illness and premature death. Okay, so that was 2011. Where are we? Did the court suit proceed? Is it somewhere in the courts at this moment in time? But has been an update in at least a decade as far as my recollection goes. So it'd be nice to know from the government exactly where that stands. And just think about some of the huge settlements. And once again, just gave it a very quick Google. And this is as far back as 1997. Mississippi became the first state to settle a class action lawsuit against tobacco. And then the next year, Florida, Texas, and Minnesota recovered $35 billion. And that's back in the 90s. So we'll see if we can get an update. I guess that would have to be through Minister Hogan of Justice and Public Safety. Did we actually file suit? Did anything actually happen? And if so, where are we? In addition to that, my recollection once again was that it was Robotham, Mackay, and Marshall were tapped to be the law firm representing. I should send Steve Marshall a text to see if indeed that's true. Because the story was also spurred on by the fact that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, through what they call a friendly expropriation, is spending $2.5 million to buy some land adjacent to the War Memorial to expand its footprint for the 100th anniversary. And of course, that's where that law office was that burnt down a number of years ago. So did we actually follow through with that particular lawsuit? I'd love to know. All right, a couple of quickies before we get to you. How are we doing out there, Dave? Let's get her going. All right, so In speaking with the Canadian Police Association on Monday, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre talking about using whatever tools the Constitution allows, and in this case, talking about potential changes to bail laws and make it harder for convicted murderers to transfer out of maximum security prisons. So it's pretty vague, but it's also fairly interesting. The federal government itself has never used the notwithstanding clause, which is basically Section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It gives parliaments in Canada the power to override certain portions of the Charter for 5-year terms when passing legislation. Now, provinces have used it in the past. Quebec, of course, invoked the clause in passing language law reform that limits the use of English in the public services. Ontario used it recently to to pass back to work legislation for education workers in 2022. So there's going to be a lot of this type of conversation. And one of the slogans he's using on the trail is jail, not bail. In 2022, the Supreme Court decision struck down a law that gave judges discretion to hand out consecutive 25-year blocks of parole ineligibility if an offender has committed multiple first-degree murders. And, of course, that came on the heels of Alexandre Bissonnette, who killed 6 people at a Quebec City mosque. So we're going to hear a lot of this. It would be nice, because when the campaign is actually officially on, it feels like it's on anecdotally, but when the writ is dropped, we're really going to need to understand more about what some of these vague utterances actually mean, because you're going to hear an awful lot about tough on crime, of which the Prime Minister, who I don't know what role he has in criminal justice in the country and enforcing bail rules and or sentences, but you're going to hear a lot about that if you want to take it on. We can do it. All right, sad report coming from the Transportation Safety Board regarding a drowning just outside the St. John's Harbour back in 2022. So this person, Terry Roberts, was working on a pilot's boat, and he went overboard. The problem is minimum staffing on these boats. So at that moment of time, there was only 2 people. And of course, they knew full well that if someone went overboard, the inability to navigate the boat and to be part of the rescue was a handful, to say the very least. Then they talk about the fact that his survival suit did not inflate automatically. And then they go on to say that the requirement was to inspect those flotation devices twice a year, when in fact the records show they were only inspected once a year. Consequently, Mr. Roberts is dead. The family, of course, through their grief, not only with the loss of a loved one, but they want someone to be held responsible. Just this past weekend was the day of mourning, workplace accidents that have led to death. And so this is a pretty clear example of there was requirements in place on the books, were not met, and the man is dead. He drowned. So our condolences to the family, but we'll see if the want for someone to be held responsible or accountable ever comes to pass. Not so sure it will. And of course, the issue regarding fishing vessel safety. Merv Wiseman was on the show not that long ago, talking about the need for an inquiry into that particular matter. There was a pretty significant review and report back in 2014. I think things have changed since then, so maybe it's time to do exactly what Merv suggests. Not wait for monumental disasters like the Ocean Ranger, but collectively, over the course of the last couple of decades, the issue is obviously very real, and fishing vessel safety needs to get a closer examination, would be my suggestion. I don't know what yours is, but let's talk about it. All right, in just about a month, the anglers will be on the water going for the Atlantic salmon. So I can't speak to this with any actual authority, but there's going to be a lot of conversation about catch and release. Now, some folks who are advocates for doing away with catch and release, they even refer back to hook and release because of the damage done simply because you hooked the salmon even if you lost it. So people will talk about how aggressively an angler will play a salmon, the amount of time they have the salmon out of the water for selfies and whatnot. And I don't know what mortality rate different people use, but the issue that's not going away, and please, if you're an angler and have a position on it one way or the other, let's talk about it, but it's water temperature. So the best temperature for the Atlantic salmon between 14 and 20 degrees. And when it exceeds 18 degrees, then we find ourselves in a position where a release becomes very unsafe and the likelihood of that salmon to die is very high. There was water temperatures recorded in some of the province's rivers last year that got as high as 27 degrees. So there's no reason to believe that there's going to be a cooling of the rivers in the future. So how does the government proceed with catch and release? So maximum of 3 fish on the Class 2, Class 4, Class 6 and unclassified rivers, maximum of 2 fish on the Class 0 rivers. But for folks who are active anglers, if they are able to catch and release as many fish as is noted by DFO, that could lead to an awful lot of dead salmon. So for those of you who are anglers and have a position on hook and release or catch and release, especially when we talk about water temperature, which is going to be the big thing of concern in the future, let's take it on. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, we're going to begin the show with the Information and Privacy Commissioner, Michael Harvey, and then you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin on line number one. Say good morning to the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner, Michael Harvey. Michael, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Before we get into your most recent work regarding access to information requests at the Premier's office, why are you leaving for BC?
Well, this is an opportunity that became available when my predecessor ended his term, and so that's Michael McAvoy. Michael has led a really distinguished career in British Columbia and has been a real mentor of mine since I became commissioner here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're pretty close around the federal, provincial, territorial table of commissioners, and I really learned a lot from Commissioner McAvoy over the years. The position in British Columbia is a broader position. We've talked many times, Patty, over the last almost 5 years, and sometimes issues related to private sector privacy have come up, like what Facebook is doing or what, let's say, Clearview AI is doing. And I've always said, listen, I can talk in general terms about this stuff, but I don't have any regulatory oversight over private sector privacy. In British Columbia, there is law that has private sector privacy oversight, and so this is really exciting to move into this area. It's a whole new set of challenges, and just from a professional development standpoint and an ability to make a contribution to public service in Canada, this is a really exciting time to be approaching those challenges.
How does it work with the private sector? Is it the full-on authority that you have with the public sector?
Well, it's on the privacy side, so it's not the same, access to information. People do have a right under federal law here in Newfoundland and Labrador and under provincial law in British Columbia and certain other provinces to find out what personal information companies have about them. But the most important part of the private sector privacy oversight is really making sure that companies are complying with the law when they collect, use, disclose personal information. And in our information society, this is critical. Information and personal information is the lifeblood of our modern economy. So this is really, the regulatory challenge of our generation. So it's really exciting from that perspective. And it was an opportunity that was just too exciting to pass up.
And you just mentioned federal law. I don't know if you have a position on this. It just popped in my mind. So Stats Canada is going to, unbeknownst to Canadians, have information regarding your banking information, cash withdrawals, credit card payments, balances. Some 500,000 bank accounts worth of information are going to be held, looking at trends. I mean, it's one thing, and they say it'll be anonymized, but we don't even know what that means. Will it simply be the raw data underneath my name and bank account number? Any position on what Stats Canada plans to do? Because we're told at every turn, protect your private information, especially financial information, your bank account, your social insurance number, your credit card. What do you think? Any comment on that?
Well, I'm not sure that I don't know the specifics of the issue that you're mentioning. I will make a general comment, though, in that this is one of the real challenges that we're facing now in both the private sector and the public sector, in that, we want our public services to be more capable. We want them to be smarter. We want them to use the data that's out there to provide us with better services, and that data-rich, evidence-based approach should make better public policy. So, in principle, the idea that the public services, and for that matter, even private companies, will use data to provide better services is in principle a good one. The question is it truly anonymized data? Are they using this data in a way that is smart but not targeted at individuals? And we know that there are real challenges with anonymizing data and making sure that it is truly anonymized and cannot be re-identified. So that's one challenge, and that's a technical challenge. The other is what I've talked about many times is social license, making sure that Canadians are on board with this general idea. Another example that occurred during the pandemic was it was revealed that TELUS was handing over data on where people using their cell phones in urban areas were moving around the country. And they were handing over that anonymized data to the Public Health Agency of Canada. And the Public Health Agency of Canada was using that data to see if their pandemic restrictions that were introduced to try to limit people moving around were actually working, to see if people were moving around less as a result of that. So that is a good public policy objective. It's smart. It turns out, and this was investigated, it turns out that the data that TELUS was providing to the Public Health Agency of Canada was indeed properly anonymized, but it still left people feeling uncomfortable. And it still made them feel like the government was keeping track of where they were going. The government was keeping track of where people were going, but they weren't keeping track of where individuals were going. And that's a nuance that I think for Canadians, it's not yet one that they were 100% comfortable with. So I think that companies and our governments need to have, and we as a society need to have a conversation about this, about what's happening with our data, what is private, what is acceptable to be used, even in an aggregate form, so that people don't feel like they're being surveilled. You know, you hear this, people say all the time, oh, I'm just giving up. There's no privacy anymore. I'm just giving up. First of all, it's not true, and that there's no privacy anymore. There are robust protections out there, and there's potential to build more. So, you know, what if we had given up back in the 18th century when our ear was full of coal soot? You know, we don't need to give up. We shouldn't give up, but we should introduce the proper regulatory protections, and we should do that in conversation with Canadians, so that we have what I've called and what others call social license.
Yeah, and then you add in some virtual care companies that would be sharing your personal information. And when you were talking, it reminded me of the whole COVID alert application that people put on their phones, which didn't have GPS. It was a Bluetooth-enabled platform. But at the same time, people were furious with that. But they had the app for the Tim Hortons and others that absolutely were following you around and sharing your information about where you went and how you shopped.
Right, and we talked about this a number of times, and commissioners, when that COVID alert app was being developed, commissioners, we were very worried about what an app could be like. Some apps in other places in the world did track people and where they went. But commissioners, we got ahead of that, and we put out a statement saying, no, don't do that. Do it in a way that doesn't track people. And then the governments did, and they designed an elegant app that did not actually collect personal information. And then at the time, I remember I talked on your show a number of times saying this app does not collect personal information, and you yourself repeatedly said this app does not collect personal information, but people didn't trust it. Right? They didn't trust it. That says a lot, right? That doesn't, I'm not trying to say here, oh, people were wrong. No, it says a lot that people are wary about this stuff, and they should be wary. But it also, as you point out, there's other apps that people use all the time that do track you and where you go. So where people are rightly confused about what's being done with their personal information. And so governments and companies owe a duty to Canadians to do a better job of explaining to them what's going on. And in particular, governments need to do a better job of strong protections to recognize that the average Canadian has a lot of stuff going on. They don't have time to be reading, lengthy privacy notices all the time and trying to parse whether their data is protected or not, or whether it should be protected or not. Governments need to pass laws, and they are doing that, actually. I mean, there are laws before Parliament. There are other laws in other jurisdictions that are providing the protections, but we need to make sure that we keep pace with technology to do right by Canadians.
It's a general and justifiable mistrust or distrust of government. I mean, that's something that's been a big part of, public discourse for a long time. Some of it's very real. Some of it's absolutely justified. Some may be exaggerated, but it's just building on that general sentiment of not trusting the government. And I would think that, maybe a healthy distrust of how corporations are tracking you as well might be healthy when you talk about your own privacy. Michael, that was a good chat, but this is not even what we wanted to talk about today. But I appreciate the time. So the request for information come from the Premier's office, travel expenses for the Premier himself and a senior advisor. What were the responses? Because they were deemed not to be satisfactory, but what did they actually share with whoever the filer was?
I do have to, and I've always tried to be really careful about talking about reports once they're out there, because there's a legal term called functus, or that means that my authority related to an investigation ends once that the report is issued. So I don't want to talk about anything in particular related to that report. That report needs to speak for itself. And when we wrote that report, we tried to be, and all of our reports, we tried to be really quite careful in the words that we chose. What I will say is that down to the issue of healthy mistrust, people need to trust that when they submit an access to information request, that when it is responded to, it is responded to in a manner that is knowingly compliant with the law. And certainly over the course of all these years since ATIPA 2015 came in, our government departments know how to respond to access requests. There might be some, from time to time, we come upon legitimate differences of opinion in how one section is to be interpreted versus another, and that's what the reports are often about, and that's what the courts are there for. That we can go through this process of helping interpret legislative language. That's a normal process. But by now, government departments know how to process relatively straightforward requests, and so people expect them to do that. They also expect them to do it on time. And again, I'm not talking here specifically about this request, but I'm talking about in general the requests that are out there. People expect that their access requests are going to be done according to the legislated timelines, and they don't want to feel like if the government is not doesn't respond to a certain access request on time, and doesn't have an approved extension, that it's kicking the can down the road or trying to avoid answering questions. The whatever information people might get back from access requests, and whatever that might do to make them to use your words, distrusting or skeptical of government, it'll only be worse if they don't trust in the process. And so people need to trust. People need to have trust in the ATIPA process, or they're not going to have trust in the government. And people, I know that because we've talked about it a number of times, you certainly remember very well the whole Bill 29 episode when the government of the day back in 2012 tried to pull back on access to information rights. People every day, they care about things like housing, they care about their family doctor, they care about, the tax level, they care about the price of gas at the gasoline pump. But if the government if they feel like their government is pulling back on access rights, then that makes all of the rest of that much worse. And so that would be my kind of parting message to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians is access to information might seem dry and bureaucratic, but it is worth paying attention to, and it's worth valuing, because it affects, to your point, it affects our ability to keep our government accountable. As we keep our government accountable on every issue, as people do it, as the opposition does it, as the media does it, that might feel like that's the imposition of distrust at that moment, but the ability to do it creates an overall higher level of trust, and we need to protect that.
Like, as part of your decision, and you rightfully say, the purpose of this act is to facilitate democracy through a variety of arenas. I would suggest Bill 29 was the undoing of the PC government at that moment in time. It's always going to be a concept of people get sick of looking at one party for year over year, term over term, but Bill 29, to be told that access to information requests were frivolous and vexatious gave us the feeling that they were looking down their nose at us. How dare you question the government? When in fact we should question the government at every turn. Michael, very quickly, I don't know if this is a fair question, but given your stay here, the new access to information legislation that came to pass, and then the government's use of solicitor-client privilege and the investigation into the cyber attack, and you being asked to recuse yourself, and all the areas that you've discussed over the years that you've been here since your appointment in 2019. What's the report card grade for the province's commitment to access to information in a fair, transparent manner?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is that this has been a really unusual 5-year period. It happened. The most remarkable thing that happened in the middle of this of my term was the pandemic, and the pandemic put a really significant operational squeeze on our government here, but also on every government in Canada. And it was, if we can think back to, what we sometimes call the before times, before the pandemic, we were actually in a pretty hard spot before that time. The fiscal situation of the province before the pandemic was pretty tight. There were increasing demands on public services. It's been a rough time for the government. So what I've called it is the last 5 years has really been an operational imperative that the government is been hard pressed to deliver on the commitments that Newfoundlanders Labradorians rightly expect of us, and that's all happened at a time when the public service has been turning over because of demographic reasons. There's been a lot of retirements, a lot of new hires, a lot of people in different jobs. So that's been tough times. So that's access to information is one of those things that when there's an operational pressure on access to information, people, resources are put behind trying to address the crisis, and oftentimes attention and resources are pulled away from the access to information function. But the irony here is that the more public services under pressure, the more people use the access to information to get information about why they're under pressure. And so all during this time, not only has the government been facing an operational squeeze, but it's also been facing a squeeze on driven by more access to information requests. So, the public bodies across the board and government, and the government in particular, has been under a kind of in a vice grip with respect to that way. So I understand it hasn't been the easiest of 5 years for access to information. You'll notice I'm trying to avoid giving an actual number grade, but I will say that there's been in some respects some bright lights. The people that are actually doing the access information work, our access coordinators out there, are doing a really good job. Some other bright lights have been Justice Osborne's report. He did an excellent statutory review into access to information, and those recommendations are currently with the Minister of Justice. You'll remember that Justice Fowler did a review on all stat offices with some really valuable recommendations that are currently before the government. So there's some bright lights. There's some reason to be optimistic there. So beyond that, as you identified some, let's say, bumps in the road along the way. There's always going to be bumps in the road, Patty, in this kind of work. Oversight is not for the faint of heart, and is not always going to be pretty. But I think by doing our work with good faith on both sides and with integrity on both sides, I think we'll come out in the best interests of Newfoundlanders Labradorians. I've
enjoyed your excellent interview here this morning, Michael. I appreciate the time you've made for the programme over the years. I wish you and your family nothing but the best on your travels in the next chapter in BC.
No, I really appreciate that, Patty, and I really appreciate what the support that your program has given and that you personally have given to helping us get our message out on access and privacy, and the important public service that you provide to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians every day when you do this work.
I appreciate that, Michael. Take good care.
And you as well.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sir. Bye-bye. It's Michael Harvey, the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Colin, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. How are you this morning?
Doing well, thanks. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good.
I want to talk about a subject that you raised in your preamble regarding Mr. Poilievre and his proposal to use a notwithstanding clause to override a constitutionally entrenched rights of Canadians. He spoke specifically the other day about mandatory minimum sentences for multiple murderers, and he's going to reinstate consecutive sentences and parole ineligibility periods for people convicted of 2 or more murders, which essentially would mean that you're never getting out of prison. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison.
This will be popular. This will be popular with Canadians because tough on crime is a very catchy phrase to use. And people want that essence of tough on crime. The question will be whether or not tough on crime works. It's one thing to have, the potential for someone who's committed multiple first-degree murders to never see the light of day again. I don't think the whole lot of Canadians are going to have a big problem with that, but it's the general concept of tough on crime and whether or not it actually works. When Stephen Harper passed a bunch of tough on crime pieces of legislation, crime was on a downward trend, but they did it anyway because politically it's advantageous to do exactly that. Now, whether or not it works, I think is highly debatable, but one of the great phrases that I've heard someone refer to, and I can't remember who said this, but this person was a defense lawyer, and talk about some of the changes between Harper and Trudeau, and whether or not the Liberals are on the right path, I think is also questionable. But this fella said, it's like an iron fist in a velvet glove. I thought, that's a nice way to put that, because you do indeed need that iron fist when we talk about criminal justice. But the velvet glove piece, whether or not that refers to bail conditions and or more attention to rehabilitation, I'm not entirely sure, but I thought that was a very eloquent way to talk about the difference between the Harper government and the Liberal government when we talk about criminal justice.
Yeah, you're talking about, with Mr. Polyev, he just... You had to look at the Bissonnette decision, which you raised in your preamble, which was the genesis, I think, for his recent statements regarding bail reform and specifically about multiple murderers. The Bissonnette decision was heard by the Supreme Court of Canada about the consecutive sentences and whether they violated the charter right to be against cruel and unusual punishment. And the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the legislation was a violation of that right. And then they went on to, which doesn't get a lot of media play here, but you had to read the decision. And then they looked at, once it is determined that that right was violated by the legislation, they then went on to a Section 1 analysis and employed the Oakes test, which was a test set out by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1986 in the Queen versus Oakes. And there are criteria there which the court had to utilize to determine whether the violation was justified. In other words, yes, it's unconstitutional. The legislation is unconstitutional, but however, notwithstanding the unconstitutionality on its face, it's a reasonable limit, the way the legislation would have been structured, to justify limiting that right in certain circumstances. So the court employed the Oakes test, and they found that the legislation didn't pass the Oakes test. So it's unconstitutional, and it's not saved by Section 1. So it is therefore unconstitutional. And they released the ruling, and the legislation was struck down as unconstitutional. Yeah. So what Polyev is trying to do now, he's going to say that, notwithstanding that ruling, and the Section 1 analysis, I'm going to use Section 33 to say I don't give a goddamn.
Well, there's a difference in legal rulings and people's emotions. There just will always be the case. So the specifics of what you're talking about, Bissonnette and the 6 people murdered at the mosque in Quebec City in 2017. So in 2022, exactly what the Supreme Court said is they struck down the law that gave judges discretion to hand out consecutive 25-year blocks of parole ineligibility if an offender has committed multiple first-degree murders. The Supreme Court might have spoken, but I can't speak for every Canadian, obviously. But I'm going to suggest that a significant portion of Canadians would support people never seeing the light of day if they killed 6 people willfully and wantonly. So that's where we're going to have, legal experts and people who are legal beagles and people who are talking about Supreme Court rulings and precedents versus people's emotions regarding these types of crimes. And that's why this will play well, I would imagine. Certainly amongst these bases, this will play very, very well. Notwithstanding clause has only been invoked by provinces. The federal government has never done it. So we'll see whether or not that brings forward any debate beyond the political hustings. But I'm going to suggest the hustings will rule the day here.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, I think you're correct. And, it goes to politicians to be informed of constitutional rights and to explain constitutional rights to people, in addition to legal, experts and legal scholars. But the people we elect to the legislatures provincially and federally in the House of Commons, they have a duty to uphold constitutional rights on their face. I mean, last week, there was a man acquitted, and we discussed this before, a man acquitted of murdering a police officer in Toronto. And in 2021, that man was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of that police officer. And immediately, the Premier of Ontario comes out and starts castigating a Supreme Court justice's ruling granting that man bail. And the Premier had no idea what the evidence was tendered at that bail hearing because it was under publication ban. But people have a constitutional right to bail. That's in the Charter. And here he goes. He's the leader of the province. It's his Justice Department that was prosecuting that case. And you had the Premier just getting on Twitter and letting it rip. Just complete ignorance. And then he turns around at a press conference last week and said he was operating on limited information. He wasn't operating on limited information. He was operating on limited intellect. He's a knuckle-dragger.
Well,
limited. He has an obligation to uphold constitutional rights, Paddy.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing with you. I think it's completely unacceptable, and there's been a variety of circumstances just like that across the country. And both sides of the political aisle, I would suggest, too, because the conviction and yet to be appealed decision by a young fellow who murdered a farmer out of Saskatchewan, all heads were chiming in on it, and it wasn't done. The book had not been closed in full. So politicians with limited information should offer limited commentary. Colin, I'm really late for the break. I'll give you the final thoughts. Go ahead.
We all have constitutional rights. The rights are there for the majority and the minority to protect all of us. And before Mr. Poilievre, who wants to become the Prime Minister of this country, wants to bring down Section 33 on any legislation, he could do that for impaired driving. There's cases now making their way up to the Supreme Court about random roadside breath tests and whether they violate Section 8 of the Charter, the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure. So if the Supreme Court of Canada rules that legislation is unconstitutional, and not saved by Section 1. Is he going to turn around and vote Section 33 on that too?
I have no idea, but those specific questions will be part of the conversation we'll have on this programme when the writ is dropped. Colin, appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Cheers.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
And of course, with the Supreme Court of Canada, they're going to hear that travel ban case too, right? That Kim Taylor in Nova Scotia was denied the right to come to the province for her mother's funeral, and the Supreme Court is going to take it up. Let's take a break. When we come back, Ed, you're next to talk about wind turbines. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Ed, you're on the air.
Who did you say was on the air?
That's you, Ed.
Yeah, Paddy, I can't even come close to getting through all that I got to say here this morning in 5 minutes. I'm wondering if I can stay through the news break.
Well, let's get started. Let's see what you have. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, well, 10 years ago, according to Andrew Parsons, they knew about this wind turbines in central Newfoundland, And anyway, I'm going to tell you some of the things that's been closed, the business that's been closed or about to be closed here in central Newfoundland. Well, 10 years ago, or less than 10 years ago, we hooked up to bottled water supply. Now it's becoming clear why. Our water supply is going to be contaminated here now. We're getting our water right now from Grand Falls. But anyway, the 5 businesses that are closed are the Jumpers Brook Quarry, the best granite in the world. You heard of a little while ago on about the Cenotad in St. John's. The government got him closed because he uses a diesel generator. Now, he could have supplied the granite. It's the best, finest granite in the world. And the granite that they're using came from India, goes to Nova Scotia, and back to Newfoundland. And this is going on the grave of an unknown soldier. There was a beef farm here that was doing really good. Everything was a go. Where the wind farms are going, they needed the land, so guess what? They put him out of business. There's a hunting lodge right now in this area that's negotiating with Everett to buy him out. So what did that tell you about the moose hunting in Newfoundland? It's done. It's going to be finished. The Mussel Farm in Pleasantview, I was talking to the owner of the Mussel Farm in Pleasantview. 2 parts of his site, now one road was put in so far. and that was a road for cutting, and it's clear cut. 2 parts of his site is already shut down. Now, he's been on the go for 40 years anyway, but when they do more cutting, it's going to be, he'll have to close. 2 parts of his site is already closed down because of contamination in his site, right? Then you got the fisheries, with what the government been coming down on the fisheries all across Newfoundland. They're closing down rural Newfoundland, and yet they're spending all their money in St. John's, $200 million now for housing, and the mayor was on saying how they got it built up instead of out. A new prison, new hospital, 2 new hospitals, new schools. They're getting ready, and the reason they're getting ready, as far as I'm concerned, is because we're not going to be able to live here. There's 16 turbines going right in our municipality, and they're big. They're 600 feet high. Less than a kilometer away, some places here in town. Our mayors, I was talking to our mayor last night, and I think he's been led down the garden path. Do you know Dean Command, Paddy?
Do I know who?
Dean Command.
No, I don't.
Well, apparently he knows you. He's quoting your name on in the mayor's meetings.
Okay, so what's his surname again?
Dean Command.
Command. No, I don't know that name. He quoted me how? Oh, well, I suppose people can quote whatever they hear from me on the show. I guess that's just how it goes.
The fine job that you're doing promoting these wind farms, and I've listened
promoting the wind farms.
Yes, I'm a religious listener to your program. I listen to your program every day.
I appreciate that, but how have I supported anything? I mean,
that's what I would like to know too, because I haven't heard it.
Well, the vast majority of conversation on this program has been 100% negative against these wind farms. We've only had a couple of callers since these proposals came forward that had anything good to say about them.
Yes. So why would, and I mean, this came from the mayors, and the mayors are all signing this now, and they're not taking it to the council. The mayors themselves are signing these letters without taking it to the councils. And, I talked to the mayor. I know the mayors around here. They're good men. There's nothing wrong with the men, but they're being led astray by somebody. I don't know why. I can't understand why. But you just answered one question right then when you said that you knew nothing about it, but still your name is being bandied around.
Yeah, I can't do anything about that.
No.
But, I mean, if someone calls who is opposed to anything under the sun, I kind of feel like my job is to ask questions about why they feel certain things about certain proposals in certain industries. I mean, that doesn't constitute being a full-throated support of anything. That's just how this job works. So if someone calls in full support of the wind project, then my role would be to ask questions as to how they justify their support, in combination with jobs and revenue and the environmental concerns. So that's just how it works around here. People will cherry-pick things I say. That's nature of the beast. I can't do anything about that. And I know that going into every single morning at 9 o'clock. People will cherry pick, will take things out of context, I'll be quoted. But of course, at the end of the day, I have zero authority, right? I have nothing to do with the ban. I have nothing to do with the proposals. I have no authority to say yay or nay to any of these things. It's just part of the conversation.
Yeah, but you are on Openline, and a lot of people listen to you.
Sure.
And all I'm asking for you or any other news media is that we're fighting for our life here. This is our life. And I've worked right across Canada, Paddy, and I've worked all over Newfoundland and Labrador. This is a beautiful place. There's no place that there's no time that I ever left to go away that there wasn't a tear in my eye. And there was no time that ever I came back when I was glad to get out of where I was, to be honest with you. But to see this now taken by a bunch of billionaires and used and desecrated, this land will be desecrated. And who this for? And I said this to the mayor last night. He got kind of irritated to me. It's for a bunch of people that murdered a generation of our young men in the First World War. And now, and his comment to me was, I don't think they're like that now. But you know something? Tell that to the people that lost loved ones in the First World War, or watch their people with shell shock, they used to call it then. Yeah. Watch them. My grandson is in the armed forces. I've never missed a Memorial Day since I can remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that has to do with wind proposals or what have you.
No, but this is where this is going. It's going to Germany. Don't they have wind in Germany?
Of course they do. And look, I mean, insofar as that goes, I don't know if you heard John Risley on this program, but when these proposals first came to light, Risley was on this show.
Yeah,
and
I heard him.
Every single question that I could think of and that listeners sent to me, I asked of the proponent. So I'm not sure what else we can do. Same thing when we've asked questions of the Minister of the Environment, when we've asked questions of Minister Parsons. That's just how this works. So, sure.
We've asked the question, will the value of our houses go down, our property go down here in Northern Ireland? We can't get an answer on that.
Well, I don't think anybody can answer that, though.
Well,
we can opine. Sure.
They can move the turbines away. Just face it, Paddy. There's 16 turbines going right in the town limits, and our town council is there and doing nothing about it. They're paid to represent us, and they're not. 70% of the people on the question of the week was when Bernard Davis went on about his. Do they agree with giving the green light to the people on the Port-au-Port Peninsula? 70% said no. 30%. So 70% people don't mean anything. You know.
Just 1 second. Do you have more to say? Because if so, I'm going to put you on hold for the news.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Let's take a break for the newscast. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's rejoin Ed on 3. Ed, you're back on the air.
Yes, Paddy. Thanks for holding over for me. Anyway, I wondering about something else too. They're using in the plant, in the hydrogen plant in Botwood, they're using solar panels, and there's no explanation for why. When all this electricity being generated with turbines all around everywhere. And I'm wondering if Botwood is going to be using solar panels, or are we just going to take the wind turbines out around everywhere else, and Botwood is going to stay clear? Because, you know, from what I can see, the ex-mayor of Botwood is one of the pushers on this. The ex-town manager of Botwood, now he came to me one day and said he was finished with the town of Botwood. He never said anything. I said, well, you're kind of young to retire. And he said, yeah, he said, but I can. And about a week after that, certainly he was announced that he was working with Everett. And then you got the ex-leader of the NIGMA. And I can see what they're doing, but, you know, these little mayors in these towns, they're being led in the dark. I think they are. I'm 79 years old, and I still got my mind. Some people say I haven't, but I still got my mind. And, you know, to see what's going to happen here, it's not, you know, it's not right. It's just not right. Are you still there?
I'm just listening, sir.
Okay. You know, I mean, they're working for these people now. But I'm wondering why are the mayors of all these small towns, I'm wondering why they're so interested. Are they being bought off, or are they being led in the dark? Because they're good people. They're not people that... Now, I saw our mayor here, right? This mayor here. Not too long ago, a few years, there was a problem here, and he was willing to go to the guillotine for it. You know, for the people in this town. But there's something has changed, and I can't get my mind around what it is.
But isn't it possible, Ed, that people might just have a different opinion as opposed to the fact that someone might be corrupted or bought off? Because I hear that all the time. But isn't it possible that people just have different opinions about the potential economics of it, or what do you think?
Well, I'll use this as an example, Paddy. I saw somebody training a town employee, and he was trying to flush 40-something kilometers of water pipe through a 2-inch hydrant. And I pulled up and I said to him, that can't happen. You can't do that. And he said, well, what else can you do? There's nothing else we can do. Well, we're on the end of a line now from Grand Falls down here. There's no flush-out lines, only hydrants. And he was training the town man. So did he really know what he was training him for? Because you can't flush. I've been in plumbing and pipe fitting for 50 years, 58 years, as a matter of fact. And I've worked all these jobs, and I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But more I see these people come in off the street, and they go to council, they go to the government, and they says, okay, I'm going to run now and they really, but when they get there, they stop listening to the people. And I don't understand that. They stop listening to what the people, 70% of the people in Newfoundland don't want these turbines. And yet everybody seems to be going ahead with 30%. What did that tell you? Is this a democracy or the couple of previous callers there, he was talking about that's a democratic society, but it's getting further and further away from the democratic society. There was a letter put out from that all the mayors signed. They never took it to their councils. The mayor signed it, but guess what? That's going to come out in the open now, and I hope that they do the right thing, and they should resign if they're not going to follow the municipal bylaws and the government bylaws. They shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and inside the world of a democracy, people vote for a government, and then we have to hope that they do what's in the collective best interest. People are clamoring for referendum, say, for instance, on this one, but at the exact same time saying they don't have enough information about the projects and can't get answers to the questions at these town halls or presentations from the various companies. So it's hard to have a referendum when people admittedly think that they don't have enough information on these things. We've talked about it extensively. I'm happy to have calls, and I'll repeat, there's only been 1 or 2 calls where people have been in support of these proposals. Every other call has been opposed to the proposals. So that's kind of how it works here on this program. We don't invite everyday people on specifically or individually to say, please come on and talk about something in a glowing light. I never do anything like that. Whatever the callers bring is what the callers bring, and I don't know what they're going to say until I press the button. Like, for instance, with your call, I had no idea what you were going to say about these wind turbines until we started to talk. So that's just how this program, and I guess this world works. So if a mayor or anybody else wants to cherry pick or take things out of context and pretend that I've been in support of or condemning something or other without actually painting the full picture, there's nothing I can do about that. And I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because I've been doing this for a long time, and that's just been nature of the beast. Whether or not it's fair, probably not. But again, that's how it works. Ed, very quickly, I'll give you the final thoughts because I do have to go.
Yeah, well, Patty, there's an old saying, they came for my friends, I did nothing. They came for my brother, I did nothing, and now they're coming for me. But guess what, Patty? I've done what I can do to try to get ahead of this. I feel like I'm butting my head against a brick wall, but as long as I can fight, it's probably not going to do us any good. Me and my wife are senior citizens now. We're on the last end of our life. But there is young people that's coming up. And there is young people that's going to be living here, but I feel very much like maybe they won't be able to live here.
I appreciate your time, Ed. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the call.
Your time, Patty. Thank you very much for the call, and thank you very much for listening to me. And all we ask is a fair chance.
Appreciate your time. Stay in touch, Ed.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Let's take a break. When we come back, the Executive Director with the United Way Newfoundland and Labrador is Lisa Marie Fifield. She's next. Then we're going to talk a little playoff hockey, how we spend our money, and then something about coconut oil. All right. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Let's take more to the Executive Director with United Way Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Lisa Marie Fifield. Lisa Marie, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing grand. Thanks. How about you?
Excellent. Thank you very much. I won't take up too much of your time. I know you got a lot of people waiting in the queue to have their say, but I really just wanted to come on this morning and just share a little bit of good news. I think we could all use a bit of good news these days.
I know I could. Go right ahead.
So today is a big day for United Way Newfoundland and Labrador as we are hosting our community celebration. And essentially what that is it's an opportunity for us to recognize our donors who support us, but also to distribute funds to individuals who reap the benefits of that support. So today we're actually distributing $384,820.92 to 41 programs and services that are all over Newfoundland and Labrador. And we just really want to let people know that there's a lot of need out there, and there's a lot of amazing work happening across the province.
We lose sight of that. We focus in on the need as opposed to some shared focus with all of the good deeds, good work, money raised, and awareness campaigns that are part of it. And I'm glad you called this morning. Give us a couple of examples of where some of that $384,000 plus and 32 cents is going.
Absolutely. There's so many wonderful programs. And just to give you an idea of what we had received initially, we received 102 applications requesting support, and the dollar value attached to that was $1.9 million. So as I said, we're distributing $384,820 to 41 programs. And as I say, they reach all over Newfoundland and Labrador. One that really sticks out to me off the hop is First Step. It's a program on the Northern Peninsula that helps individuals who need to access important medical care to actually get to those appointments. Costs associated with travel for medical care is not cheap by any means. So First Step helps to offset those costs and ensure that people are able to access necessary medical appointments. Another great program that we've supported this year is the Jimmy Pratt Memorial Outreach Center. They are doing a pilot program for a seniors grocery cooperative, so they can help seniors access foods at a reasonable price without having to have, like a Costco membership or the costs associated with having to purchase, a gazillion of one item. So the program is aimed at, making sure that that those deals are available to low-income seniors who need access to foods and supports like that. And another one is, this is a really fun one. I like the idea of this one. This one is through the CNIB, and it's a family camp. So for a family who has a child living with sight impairment, obviously there's some unique challenges that go along with that. So the CNIB here in Newfoundland and Labrador are facilitating a family camp. So kids can go and be with other kids who are experiencing the same things as them, but also the families can go and attend as well, and get some supports from other families who are going through the same thing as them. So that's just a really small sampling of what we're doing today. But I would really encourage your listeners or anybody who'd like to hear more about what we're doing, check us out on Facebook. I'm sure that later on today we'll have some photos and stuff up from our event, and check out our website because, as I say, there's a lot of great things happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're just so thrilled to be a part of that and to help ensure that these programs can continue, or that we're able to help people get programs off the ground.
And we're really pleased that you and your team are doing the work you do, and I personally appreciate you telling us about it here this morning. Lisa, thanks for your time. Enjoy the day and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Patty. You have a great day.
Very same to you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Lisa Marie Fifield, Executive Director with the United Way. Let's go to line number 5. Ted, you're on the air. Ted on line 5, you're on the air. Ted on 5? You might have been on the air, but no, you're not. Let's put Ted on hold. Let's go to line number 2. Shirley, you're on the air.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How about you?
Oh, hanging in there. Anyway, I tell you what I was calling for this morning. I didn't want to talk online because my voice is terrible in this kind of weather, etc. But I heard a gentleman on last night where he says he got cancer of his hair. I had that about 2 or 3 years ago, and it came back before 2 or 3 years ago, like altogether, I guess it was 5 years. And I used to keep getting it removed, etc. So the last time I had it, my family doctor referred me to a dermatologist, and he prescribed 5-FU cream. He didn't tell me what it was. Nurse gave it to me. So when I came home, I thought it rang a bell with me. So I went down to see the pharmacist, and he told me, yes, it was a chemotherapy drug. So I don't believe in chemotherapy, okay? So that's my choice. So anyway, I came back and I told I'm living in a seniors apartment building, and I start discussing it with different people. And one gentleman in the building suggested I try coconut oil. So he went out and bought me a book. It's called A Coconut Oil Miracle by Bruce Fife. So I start using it. And then I went back and saw my dermatologist on my regular appointment, and he looked at my hair and he said, wow, he said, that cream really did wonders. I said, no, I didn't use it. He said, you didn't use it? I said, no, sir. He said, what did you use? So I told him. Oh, he said, there's nothing wrong with that. He says, completely healed.
Amazing. Now, I'm always hesitant to promote anything what people should do to treat their own health.
Yeah, I know.
But coconut oil, there is some evidence-based recommendation regarding coconut oil. I know for a fact, like one of my friends had a little baby, or as an infant had some eczema, and the doctor actually told coconut oil, and it worked. There's all sorts of work out there. They talk about, well, the fact that coconut oil is an antimicrobial, number one. It does indeed have positive impacts on people's skin. Apparently it does something to protect your hair. I know people who use it for their hair. So I'm not going to encourage anyone to use coconut oil or pentinin cream or anything else, but apparently it does have built-in health impacts.
Yeah, the only reason I called was I thought, well, maybe this gentleman could be listening, and if he called, asked for my number, you could give it to him.
Okay, I will.
Okay, and if he's got a computer, he could go in online and look up the coconut oil miracle.
And fair enough, if people want to do that type of work and look for alternatives, that's certainly up to them. But I when I saw coconut oil in my subject line, I had a quick look, and some real, verified websites have all sorts of posting. 10 evidence-based health benefits of coconut oil from Healthline. Then WebMD, which people should take with a grain of salt sometimes. But all the way down, Medical News Today, coconut oil, benefits, uses, and the controversies.
So, I know it worked for me.
Fair enough.
I use it every day on my hair, make sure it stays healthy. When I say here, I'm saying EAR. I probably sound like everything sounds the same way.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I needed to say. So I was a person that was calling in once before concerning fungus. So I'm going to start heating the coconut oil now because I've done enough of research on it that I know it's healthy to eat. So I think I got to take 2 tablespoonfuls a day or something.
Fair ball.
It's got to be pure, natural, organic.
I appreciate making time for the show, Shirley. Thank you.
And I thank you, too.
My
Have
pleasure.
a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. And, of course, look, people will do as they see fit, right? And just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. But just one of the links that I clicked on, and this is from the School of Public Health at Harvard University. And so basically, I'll just very quickly, coconut oil. In recent years, the popularity of coconut, and particularly coconut oil, has soared because of the touted health benefits. Fueling the coconut oil trend, celebrity endorsements have claimed the ingredient help blast away belly fat, curb appetite, strengthen the immune system, prevent heart disease, stave off dementia and Alzheimer's disease. A survey found that 72% of Americans rated coconut oil as healthy, though only 37% of nutrition experts agreed. Coconut oil is popular in several trending diets, including ketogenic and paleo diets. And it goes on to say that they verify some of these things, and my School of Public Health at Harvard, reasonable outfit to listen to. So they've got some issues here regarding clinical trials that they've conducted and So I'll get down and read a little bit more on it. But look, don't take it from me or Shirley. If you're interested in something like that, it's certainly the caller yesterday regarding the regrowth of something around his ear. Maybe coconut oil is for you. Don't listen to me. I'm not a doctor. Let's take a break. When we come back, the Will They or Won't They tour is on the road. That's an intimate conversation of laughs and arsing around with Jan Arden and Rick Mercer. Rick, right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Well, the Will They or Won't They tour kicked off in Kitchener a few days ago, Halifax last night, Moncton tonight, and St. John's here on May the 2nd. Joining us on line number one is one half of the duo, Rick Mercer. Good morning, Rick. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
That's kind. Thanks. How about you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm having a great time out here.
No doubt you are. So the basic question to begin with, we'll get to how the tour's going, but the Will They or Won't They tour, will you or won't you do what?
Well, Jan and I have a very odd relationship. It turned out it began as a fluke. She came on my show once, and there was this insatiable demand from the public to keep having her back. Like I would have Joe Clark on the show, and he would be good, former prime minister, but no one came up to me on the street 2 days later and said, "When are you getting Joe Clark back?" And with Anne, there was this immediate desire that she come back, and it turned into this thing where I would bring her to the top of the CN Tower. I would put her on a zip line. I'd plunge her in cold water. I would do all these things, and people, for some reason, began to think that we had a relationship of some sort. There was fan fiction online of an erotic nature at one point. It's been a very odd relationship, and so this is a great turn of events for me to be out there on the road with Jan, having these live shows. And will we or won't we? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Funny things happen on the road.
If this was Friday night, we'd get to elaborate on the erotica, but we'll probably have to leave it at that for this moment.
Rick, we will indeed.
Hilarious stuff. So obviously the chemistry was very real, and Canadians got a great kick out of it. So what goes on the tour? So you talk about intimate conversations and laughs. Is this an all scripted performance that you bring to each city, or how does it work?
It's bonkers in the sense that I like to be prepared my entire life. That's the way I've always worked. It's that's kind of the world of comedy. And so Jan had a book and I had a book, but my book was nonfiction, hers was fiction. We both had the same publishers, and we said, we should do a few events, like a book signing or something to promote our books. And before we knew it, we were booked into 4 rooms around the country, and they just weren't book signings. People were showing up. Like in Vancouver, we sold 1,400 tickets in an hour. And so we kind of said, well, we're going to do more than sign books. What are we going to do? And Jan just kept saying, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I was saying, Jan, what are we doing? It'll be fine. And honestly, I didn't know what we were doing until the first night we walked on stage at Hot Docs in Toronto, which is another 1,000-seat room. And I wanted to kill her. I was like, I'm going to strangle this woman. I have no idea what we're doing out here. And the night flew by. The laughs were incredible. There was a standing ovation. It was just one of the best nights I've ever had on stage. And by the time we hit Vancouver, there was a national tour planned, and that's what we're doing now.
Well, when you get on the road, it takes its own flair. Do you have to craft things for audience? Because a certain laugh that you'll get in Kitchener might not be the same laugh you'll get in Moncton versus St. John's versus Waterloo or whatever the case may be. So do you anticipate that, because you've been traveling the country for decades at this moment in time, does it take a different approach to get the same sort of belly laugh in different pockets of the country?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I think that, and this is not blowing my own horn, but I think that people in show business who tour for a living inherently understand exactly where they are in the country and what flies better than almost anyone. I've often said this about people in the world of politics, and they say, so-and-so has their finger on the pulse. You want to talk to someone about, what's going on in the country. Talk to Alan Doyle. He's the guy who's on the road nonstop around the clock. He's the one who's been in every nook and cranny of the country. And so when you do that, and I've done the same thing for quite a while. Yeah, you know exactly what will fly and won't fly, because every market is different. And I used to notice that when I would go out on the road with Just for Laughs, and I would be the headliner, but there would be 5 other comedians, and we would be killing ourselves watching a performer in Toronto, and then we'd be getting on a plane, and I'd be thinking, I hope he's not going to try that material in St. John, New Brunswick, because that ain't going to fly. And sometimes they would, and sometimes if they had any sense, they wouldn't. But it's definitely different wherever you go. But I'm not worried about St. John's. I mean, St. John's obviously is my town, and Jan loves playing St. John's. She had a great time the last time she was there, so I'm just looking forward to it.
Bulk of the tour is sold out. Still some tickets remaining for the performance here in St. John's on the 2nd of May, so if you're intrigued or interested, you better get at it. Tout sweet.
It's like last night we were in the Scotiabank Centre here in Halifax, and they cut the bowl off like they'll do with the Mary Brown Centre, and it was 3,000 people, and it was pandemonium. It was so much fun, and there were a couple of moments where I don't know if I've laughed as hard at things that I've known Jan for 10 years that came out of her mouth. More than that I'd never heard before. It was a great night. It's the oddest turn of events in my career. I always wanted to tour. I always wanted to do comedy, but this kind of format, this relationship, it's nothing that I ever saw coming. It's a lot of fun.
So in the world of intimate conversations, does that include with the audience, or is that between you and Jan?
Yeah, when you go in, there's a QR code up on the screens, and so if you know how that works, you can take a picture of the QR code and you can feed us questions. And near the end of the show, the questions are brought out to us, and that's turned out to be wildly popular. It's we can't answer all 600 questions, but we have a highly scientific process apparently, and we answered some of them, and it was great. Every night has been wild.
Not that this has anything to do with it, but I met Jan Arden once. It was in the early 90s. I was working at the Jasper Park Lodge, and for some strange reason, Jan Arden was performing on Good Morning America, which was being taped at JPL at that moment in time, and I was just on staff, and just the interaction was, "Hi, Jan, nice to meet you." Said, "Yeah, you too," boom, and it kept going. But that's how I met Jan Arden in the early 90s in JPL. But Good Morning America, of all things. Anyway.
Oh, well, when she did Living Under June, that album, it exploded. And for about 3 or 4 years, she said she left Calgary and she just never got back for 3 or 4 years. She was on the road nonstop, and it involved all those things, right? Letterman, The Tonight Show, and Good Morning America, and Rosie, and tours all over the world. And she's done it all. And then on top of that, she writes the books, and then she does the acting, and now she's doing this. It's incredible. And what I find amazing, she's an incredibly generous person. And I know that. You remember a couple of years back when the kids in Newfoundland won the contest to go to Rio and be in that rock show.
Yeah.
And I got a call from someone associated with them, and I didn't know them at all. And they explained to me that these kids needed to raise $10,000 to go to Rio. And they were going to do an auction of some sort. Did I have something to sign for an auction? And I was like, I'm sure we'll work something out. And then that night I'm talking to Jan on the phone. I said, these kids are going to do a rock show in Rio. They won. They got to raise $10,000. So, and then Jan goes, I'll send them 5, you send them 5, and they'll have it by morning. And I was like, well, I was going to suggest you sign a poster and mail it to me. but she's an incredibly generous person that way. And being on the road with her, she nonstop makes these videos through this website Cameo, where you can go on and have celebrities do happy birthday greetings, or this greeting or that greeting. And she's doing them nonstop. And then she showed me the website. All her money goes. She's given $250,000 away to charity. It's ridiculous.
She's Canada's Dolly Parton.
That's what she does in the van while you're driving down the highway. I had sunglasses on listening to a podcast.
It's great stuff. So tell the folks where to get tickets. And I want to talk about Hometown Stars before we run out of time.
Well, it's a Ticketmaster joint force, but if you go to the Mary Brown Centre website, you can get tickets there. And I hope people come out. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Rick, it's always good to have you on the show. And this year you got yourself a star on Canada's Walk of Fame, which is pretty cool. No one sets out to get those types of accolades and think that, I've got a TV show. Here comes the Order of Canada and a spot on the Walk of Fame. But that is kind of a cool nod. With such an eclectic group.
The Walk of Fame is incredibly eclectic, and I used to walk down the Walk of Fame all the time on my way to the office for over 16 years. And as I said before, I'd always go by and make sure Gordon Pinsent was in good shape. There was no gum on the square, and nod, say hello to Gordon. And it's hockey players, it's scientists, it's judges, it's a lot of show business people. So it's like you say, it's never something you think that you're ever going to be there, because there's Bachman Turner Overdrive. How would I ever end up on this street? But so it was a real it was very unexpected, and it was a lovely ceremony. And this year, they do a hometown event now, and I didn't know that when it happened. So we're going to have a little ceremony at the Justina Center in Outer Cove, and I get to give $10,000 away, so I'm giving it to the Easter Seals, Newfoundland and Labrador, so that's great. And my partner and I, Gerald, we have a foundation. We're going to match it, so it'll be a nice, I don't know, someone will say a few words, and we'll distribute some checks and go home and have a cup of tea with mom and dad.
And I mean, speaking of eclectic, the other person who got a star in this class is Avril Lavigne. So there you go. Rick, always good to have you on the show.
Did. Thank you so much. All righty, thanks for talking to me, Patty.
Break every leg on the road, Rick.
All righty,
Take
thanks,
care,
brother.
Bye-bye. All right, there you go. Rick Mercer on tour with Jan Arden. And, the chemistry there is pretty obvious, right? Let's take a break. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Ward 4 councillor here in the city of St. John's. That's Tom Davis. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you.
I started using coconut oil a while ago, just on my skin and stuff. Apparently, it also has a 20% sunblock as well. So I found it excellent, and just the same stuff we use to cook with. So you don't even have to buy anything special.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden, like it happens to me all the time, I'll end up reading about coconut oil for half the afternoon. It's just bizarre sitting in this chair. Anyway, there we go.
Absolutely. And a shout out too about making sure people get their studded tires removed. There has been movements over the years to try and get them banned. Mayor Aker went at it in 2019. Municipalities, Newfoundland. It does impact the roads through raveling, they call it, which basically is just the actual loss of aggregate from the roads. And in Washington State, they determined it cost them $8 to $10 million. In Sweden, studded tire pavement displacement amounted to 450 tons per winter. 450,000 tons per winter of loss on Sweden's roads. So it's a real thing, and studded tires really aren't effective unless there's actually ice on the road. It's actually not as effective if it's dry or wet or slushy or even dry snow. So something to think about next year.
It's true. Some people just, they have that sense of security with the studded tire. But studded tires cause at least 100 times more abrasion damage than wear increase produced by sand and salt with unstudded tires. 100 times more.
Yeah, there you go. I want to thank the residents that came out Terrace last Saturday. We got out and did a cleanup, and as well the members of the St. John's Gospel Hall. They helped us clean up. They provided snacks and bathrooms, and it was a great day. And we got a full big pickup truck load of garbage and plastic out of the rivers and off the roads. Lots more to be done. So I want to encourage anybody who wants to organize community cleanup. If you want some help, you can reach out to me, tdavis@stjohns.ca, or you can take it on yourself. There's also St. John's Clean and Beautiful if you're within the city. But I know that a lot of communities around the province encourage it, and they'll bring resources and garbage bags and help pick up the garbage afterwards too.
Fair enough. And let's get to your main topic before we have to take another call.
Thank you. So on a federal level, I want to talk a little about maybe like critical thinking or like big picture thinking, and something like, when you look at critical thinking in an ideal world, it should create better decision making by helping individuals give them the tools to weigh options, assess the consequences of those choices, and hopefully arrive at better choices. And I feel like a lot of times we're all in the moment, and I just want to remind people of a couple of things. So in the country, on a federal level, we're paying $1 billion a week in interest on our debt, and this year there's going to be a $40 billion deficit, so it's going up. In the province, this year we're borrowing, since June we've borrowed $2.1 billion, and we're paying $1.1 billion a year in interest, which is $23 million a week that we're all having to pay. And for perspective, all the sales taxes, income taxes, and corporate taxes together is about the same as what we're spending on health care. And so obviously, we've got this challenge, and I want to, kind of compare that to how do we try and reverse that in a country not that far away from us with a similar climate. In Norway, over there, since they've discovered oil in the 70s, they've managed to accumulate, they call it their pension fund, which is $1.62 trillion in assets right now. They actually own 1.5% of all of the world's listed companies on stock exchanges, which is really hard to wrap your head around. And
yeah, but people make that comparison all the time when it's not really directly analogous. I mean, the Norwegian government were the majority stakeholders, equity holders in the offshore oil itself. So their fingers in the North Sea is vastly different than our 4.9% out at Hibernia or something. So they're just two really distinctly different things. Plus, on top of that, they were the primary beneficiary of all the R&D work that was done in the oil industry in that country. So they've set themselves up vastly different than us. And I'm not suggesting the Canadian or Newfoundland Labrador government should get involved to that extent, because for many people, they don't trust them to fix the roads, let alone operate the oil business.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's more of a comparison. So since we got into the oil business, we've taken in $40 billion in royalties, over $40 billion in royalties in the province, not to mention all the income tax and sales tax that has been the result of all that money flowing through our economy. But in the same time, we've incurred over $30 billion in debt. So, and I don't know how we stop this trend when it's like everything is all about spending more money and everybody wants what they want when they want it. But somehow we've got to come together as a community to not only clean up the province, like physically clean up the province, which we treat as a little bit of a dump, some of us, but also our bodies, which is having this long-term impact because, again, all the taxes that we all pay is just paying for health care, and we're spending more and more every year. And we're treating our bodies in a lot of cases like garbage cans as well. And that's ultimately probably our biggest source of spending challenges in this province because it keeps going up. And it's everybody and our health care outcomes, unfortunately, are worse. So when we look at a critical thinking point of view, it's not about spending more money, although that's what we want to tell ourselves. It's about having this really difficult inner conversation with how we are managing what we put into our body and how we treat ourselves. So, at the end of the day, government and the 40 people we have in there in the House Assembly are not going to be able to save us, and we must save ourselves. Parallel to that is the fact that when we look at, Newfoundland is always, whether it's the drugs that are, unfortunately coming across the Canada from west east, all the trends come from west east eventually, and which gives us a really big advantage. But it's amazing how we all sit here in Newfoundland and we kind of in denial until all of a sudden it's here, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's a big crisis. And using the same example, electrification of vehicles, it's almost like everybody who doesn't want to change is like, oh, see, electric vehicles now that they've kind of leveled off in a lot of North America. Well, not leveling off in China, by the way, but we can look at what happens in Asia and what happens in Europe and what happens in North America moving west-east, and we should be able to use that to our advantage. But instead, we kind of all sit in our living rooms and we're like, oh, we don't want to change, and we're going to resist it to the last minute. And unfortunately, when it comes to the finances, time can be our friend if we invest money, like the Norwegians did, but it can also be our enemy. So on a personal level, if someone were to take $8.76 a day from when they're 30 to when they're 65, they'd have $1 million in their bank account, and then you wouldn't be worrying about having food security. However, if we all look at our choices that we all make, that $8.76 shouldn't be that hard to find. If you start when you're 20 and go from 20 to 65, you got to put away $3.16 a day to have $1 million. So it's one of these things where we have to somehow, think critically and have a talk with our loved ones and say, we don't need to be living this kind of responsive life where we're just buying and trying to keep up with the Joneses, whoever they are. And I just think we all have the opportunity to make better choices, whether it's what we throw on the ground, what we put in our body, or how we spend our money. And instead of pointing over at someone to blame, look in the mirror. And I really believe that Newfoundlanders, Labradorians, wasn't that long ago that we were independent people and we made better choices. So I think we have it within ourselves and within our culture and community to turn it all around and to emulate at least whatever we can of Norway or places in the world that seem to have a better grasp on the future and the choices that we all need to make.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, at one point, when you talk about how much we have to borrow and then the establishment of a sovereign fund, like even the rainy day fund that the province has in place at this moment in time, I don't get it. I simply do not get it. I mean, if we're borrowing and we're servicing a debt, why are we putting money away as opposed to paying down the debt? Like, I just really don't get it. I appreciate the time, Tom. Off I go.
Take care, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye. Dave, you want me to take another one before we get to the news? Okay, how about Brian? Line number 2. Brian, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
Patty, I want to talk about Bob Cole. Howie Meeker once compared Bob Cole to the great Danny Galvin. Now, you remember Danny Galvin. You're a Montreal fan.
Oh, yeah.
He was a great announcer. And so was Bob Cole. And, when Bob Cole died, it took me back to my younger days when I was 6 or 7 years old. I lived on Bannerman Street, which is right down by the Corona building. And there was a man who had a confectionery store there. His name was Jack English. And every night to be a hockey game, the men in the community would gather into his confectionery. Now, in those days, Pepsi, if they delivered Pepsi to his store, it would be in wooden boxes. And the man would take the wooden boxes and sit on them and listen to Bob Cole call out the game, especially in 1960 when St. Pat's beat St. Bon's. And I remember that. And when Bob Cole died, it took me back there. And what a tremendous, tremendous gift I had, because I remember those days and brought me back to my younger days. And I really admire Bob Cole. Now, in saying that, I had to turn off the television a couple of weeks ago watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. It was on Sportsnet. Well, Patty, they spent 3 hours having a chin wag, and now and then they call out the game. I don't look at the NHL anymore. I just wait until the morning and look at the sports news. I found out that Florida beat Tampa Bay last night. And for the first half hour of the game, all they talk about is Steven Stamkos, and this is going to be his last game. Patty, I don't care about Steven Stamkos. I don't know him from Adam.
Yeah, they're just talking about a guy who's had just a pretty incredible career with one team and whether or not he's going to be a bolt for the rest of his career. I mean, he's in first place in all the notable things, games played, goals scored, all those things. He's won the Rocket 3 times. So, I mean, there's a reason they talk about the biggest stars in the game. But anyway, before I get to the news, final thoughts to you, Brian?
My thoughts is that there'll never be another Bob Cole. There'll never be another Danny Galvin. There won't even be another Paddy Daly. And I'm missing all that now. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the time, Brian. Thanks for the call.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Bob Cole, absolute legend. They talk about the Trinity. Who are the big three? The obvious, right? So we've got Foster Hewitt, good evening to Canada and Newfoundland, because, of course, we were part of the country at that time. Danny Galvin with his scintillating save. Bob Cole with a variety of phrases that have really latched onto the popular lexicon, All right, oh, baby. Let's take a break. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Well, one popular podcast series of independent journalism is Canadaland. Jesse Brown is a publisher and journalist with Canadaland, and he joins us on one. Good morning, Jesse. You're on the air.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing good.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Are we live on the air right now?
Oh, yeah, we're live.
This isn't going to be edited and uploaded or streamed. This is we're live on the air across Newfoundland.
We're live on the air across the world. And yes, we don't edit anything on this program. We're live straight to air. And of course, we will upload. You can find our podcast wherever you find your podcasts. So that's what we're at here this morning. I know about Canadaland because I've listened to several of your episodes. Give the folks an idea what you're working on.
we talk about Canadian politics and news. So we talk about Canadian media. We've never talked about you. We had a couple of our people go out to Newfoundland on a story, and they came back and said, we got to pay attention. You got to do a story on these guys. They've been doing this show. They beat CBC. Is that true? Are you more popular than CBC?
In this slot, we are, yeah.
So I'm live in the ears of more people in Newfoundland than CBC. I could say anything to Newfoundland right now.
Pretty much. Yeah, we try to keep the cussing to a bare minimum if possible. But other than that, this is a bit of a free-for-all.
That's incredible. And this is AM radio?
This is AM radio. We know that's a bit of a dying breed in the country. And, you know, I spoke with Charisse, and you guys contacted me and wanted to do an interview. And we talked about just how novel it is for AM radio to continue to thrive in this province. And it does. Maybe it's just a unique feature of this province. Maybe it's sort of island mentality. Maybe it's that sort of comfort food that people get when they listen to this particular station. But whatever the reason is, I'm thankful it's the way it is.
That's incredible. I mean, like, have I called Newfoundland or have I called 1948? I mean, you guys have the internet, right?
Yeah, we have the internet. I'm looking right at the computer screen at this moment in time. We don't live in igloos, and we do have cable TV as well.
This is incredible. This is like, and you do this every morning for 3 hours.
Yeah, 9 to 12 weekdays. That's exactly what we do. And this program has been on for decades. You know, it'd be a mistake for people to say that, you know, I'm any sort of reason why the show thrives, because I inherited an institution. So this has been a big program for a long time. And, you know, we take all walks of life, like I said to Charisse, from princes to paupers, from prime ministers to everyday folks just looking for a bit of help or airing their grievances or concerns or questions, whatever it is. And I never know what's coming until I press the button. So it's a unique show.
And how long has the show been on the air?
I don't really know. Dave, do you have an idea exactly when this started? But it's been 50 years or so, I would imagine.
That's incredible. Why is it so popular? Why is it endured?
I really don't know. I suppose because it evokes some emotions and emotional responses. You never know what you're going to get, so maybe variety is part of it. You get to hear from everyday people in the province about their general concerns, you know. And as I say to the listeners, there's no problem or issue that's too small or too big. Whatever it is, if it concerns you, then it's good enough for me.
All right, well, this is an opportunity for you. I mean, you're speaking to somebody from Toronto. I'm in downtown Toronto right now. You could ask me anything about Toronto.
I'm going to be in downtown Toronto in July, coming up for a few Jays games. I have a sister that lives in Toronto. She's been there for quite a long time, too. So, you know, as much as people call it the concrete jungle and, you know, people in Toronto think they're the center of the universe, I actually personally really like Toronto.
I thought Newfoundlanders were supposed to not love Toronto so much.
Yeah, many of us will go to the, you know, when there's a bit of snow, call in the military, that old trope that goes around every winter. But, you know, and I guess I can't speak for anyone but myself. I personally enjoy going to Toronto, always have. It's a pretty cool city. It's got a lot of stuff to do that we can't necessarily access around here. But yeah, Toronto takes its knocks for the obvious reasons. You know, as a sports fan, the Toronto media is really quite frustrating. It's so Toronto-centric that it becomes a little bit boring, I would suggest. But, of course, you do what your audience requires. And if you're in Toronto, and that's the biggest media market in the country, of course that's the bent that Toronto media takes. It can be frustrating for the rest of the country, and it does bring upon that sort of tattered reputation of the city. Whether it's deserved or not, I don't know, but you know as well as I do, that's how people think and talk about Toronto more often than not.
Oh, it's deserved. I'll tell you the one thing that people get wrong in the rest of Canada is they think that Toronto, they think that they're the center of the universe. They think that they're, you know, the center of Canada. We don't actually think about the rest of Canada. We probably should, but we forget that the rest of Canada exists.
And much to the chagrin of the rest of Canada, I suppose. But that's a good way to put it. I didn't really think of it in those terms, but I suppose as someone who's living and operating in the big city, then so be it, Jesse. So go ahead.
I have so much admiration for what you do, because it's like this is an age of trolls and horrible content and everything, you know, moderation, and you know, we edit the heck out of everything we do. You just have an open line. Anybody calls in, opinionated people, kooks, trolls, you take it all, and you do it for 3 hours a day. That's incredible.
Yeah, I suppose it is, and I try not to overthink it. I've become pretty good at compartmentalizing things, because if I didn't, I'd be living in anguish all day, every day. And look, you know, for people that don't like me or don't like the show, so be it. As long as they listen, that's good enough for me.
What do you do when it goes off the rails? Do you hang up on people?
No, I've only hung up on people a couple of times in the past 14 years or so. We try to rein it in and try to bring it back to some sort of reasonable to and fro, some reasonable discussions, but it can get away from you. That's the nature of the beast, doing live anything, television and or radio. So there's not much in the way of bleeping unless someone drops an F-bomb, and I haven't hung up on anyone in quite a long time. But yeah, it's just how it goes. People are passionate and people are angry. You know, things have actually changed demonstrably over the course of my tenure on this program, whether that be the pandemic or economic woes or the cost of living or the inflation, whatever the case may be. People are pretty angry, and I know you know that doing what you do, and so we just have to navigate it all. Well, earlier in the program today, we had a couple of calls talking about some good news, you know, because every time that we dwell on the bad, you get caught up in that wave, right? It's that death spiral of woe and anguish and anger. So every now and then it's nice when people pepper the show with a good story or a bit of good news or whatever the case may be, so we take it as it comes. You know, beggars can't be choosers.
It's like the opposite of the way people communicate with each other right now, because you actually have to talk to a human being when you're doing a call like this or conversation like this. You can't just leave a nasty comment and feel good when people hit like. It's pretty old school. It's like the opposite of social media.
Yeah, and I think one of the you're right. This does have a feel or a flair of some social media related content, but thankfully it endures. And I've been asked many times as to why I think that is. I have no earthly idea. I don't know how they get the caramel in the caramel bar. I don't know the 11 herbs and spices for KFC, but I don't question it. As long as people tune in, as long as the advertisers are pleased with the outcomes, then we just roll every day.
Every day. I mean, this is the beating heart of media, of the birth of radio, and it's something that I think a lot of places have lost. And what a community has when they've got a forum like yours, it kind of holds things together. It seems like it's the media is collapsing in the rest of Canada, and everybody's going their little bubbles, but you still have this common space, and you get politicians, everybody calls into this show. That's my understanding.
Well, I mean, we've had all of the three federal leaders on over the course of time. So the Prime Minister's been on this program. Mr. Poilievre's been on a few times. We've had the Deputy Prime Minister. We've had various premiers across the country, cabinet ministers, federally and provincially. It's just actually part of what's going on. Now, interestingly enough, as I say that, on line number 7 coming up soon is the Saskatchewan Minister of Immigration and Career Training, Jeremy Harrison, one of their MLAs out in Saskatchewan. I believe that's about the labour market transfer dollars that have decreased in the most recent federal budget. So you never know what's coming. There's another caller there wants to talk about her rental unit. Hasn't had hot water for 3 weeks. So there you go.
Some hot topics on the way. So because if people want to reach Newfoundland and Labrador, they have to go on your show. Basically, this is the destination.
Well, I think that's what they've deduced. Whether that's right or wrong, lots of good media operating here. Shout out to my colleagues, whether it be at Saltwater, at the Telegram here, NTV, CBC, the Independent, which is an independent operation like yours.
Sure.
And then there's all Newfoundland and Labrador. So I throw around the credit when it's due. I don't play that petty game of who gets the story first wins kind of stuff. If someone unfolds something or reveals something, we give them a shout out because they're doing the hard work out there too, because this can be a really thankless profession. And you're right, people come at me left, right and center, but so be it. Little do they know is that you can't hurt me at this stage. My skin is like an elephant's, so it's just how things go. And I understand the anger and I understand the passion, and if people need to get stuff off their chest and they want us to hold governments to account, that's what we're trying to do. And big industry conversations, it's just a bombshell of a show some days, that's for bloody well sure. And I was really caught off guard when you folks reached out to me to talk about this program and what we do and how long we've been here. And I harkened back to some stories of decades gone by where former Premier Joey Smallwood, as the Premier of the province, the so-called Father of Confederation, he'd pull up in his car outside the station here on Kemont Road in the city of St. John's. A reporter would go down with a recorder and speak to the Premier right there on the corner, right on the street, and that'd be part of the broadcast on a daily fashion. So it's just the weirdest little machine that keeps on chugging, and of course I'm pleased with that. Some days I'm not that pleased when I leave at 12 o'clock, but again, nature of the beast. What else do you want to talk about this morning, Jesse, before I ask you why the Leafs are so terrible?
I can't help you with that. I'm sports illiterate, but you have some really interesting. I mean, it must be difficult every day doing this. We did a podcast series called The Newfoundlander, where Justin Brake, who you may be familiar with, he did a whole thing on the Kalapu Indigenous Nation, a lot of the controversies and so many people claiming indigenous heritage in Newfoundland. Like there's some really interesting stuff happening in your part of the country.
Yeah, we've had Justin on this program in the past as well. He was actually arrested one time at the Muskrat Falls site when he went through and broke the court injunction, which was really quite fascinating. The Halibut conversation is a classic case of federal government reverse engineering. They anticipated some 18,000 people would apply for status. Lo and behold, tens of thousands applied. There was family members. You grew up in the same community that one was given their Halibut status, another was denied. It's the strangest old story. Government really got out over their skis on that one and did not handle it properly or appropriately. So we've talked about that with Justin and various other people here on this program. Just added to the mix of issues and concerns that make it to air on a regular basis.
Well, you got locals who need your attention. I don't want to take up all your time, but what do you think? Like, what should we get our heads out of our rear ends in the rest of the country, and specifically in Toronto, when it comes to, like, whenever I turn my attention towards Newfoundland and somebody points me in that direction, something fascinating is happening. But we do get lost in our own business here. Like, what frustrates you about the media that you're hearing out of Toronto?
Well, I think sometimes it's just far too much of it is 100,000 feet above sea level, when the reality of life is politics is local, politics is retail. So, when we see the small outlets like small weekly newspapers or what have you go by the wayside, it's really damaging to how we operate and what we understand and where we get our information. Because, for instance, the big operations, the National Post are not going to cover council meetings out in Badger. But some of the issues that really concern the folks in that area, it's those locals that are covering the stories that get them the information they need. We can all go to the internet and get the big headlines about Gaza and Ukraine and Lebanon and what have you in the United States and Trump stuff and all that nonsense. But the reality of life is things that really impact you are right where you live. It's that old 3-foot circle. So if we lose that here in the country, we'll be reliant on the big outlets which have zero interest in the vast majority of things that concern me, concern my listeners, concern people living in this province. So we cannot lose that. This is not about me. This is just about how we uncover issues, talk about things that matter. People, we could all use a civics course. The vast majority of things that I'm going to worry about today, I need to rely on the municipal government to deal with them. I need to rely on local reporters covering council chambers to bring me those stories. I can get the issues on the campaign hustings of the federal government wherever I turn digitally. But it's those other concerns and the voice of people who they impact. When we lose that, we lose a pretty important voice. That concept of, knowing what's going on in your own backyard, that's being pushed aside for all the wrong reasons. It's not beneficial to anybody. So when we talk about, government bought and paid for media and the fake news nonsense that goes on, we're collectively just damaging our own coverage. We're damaging our own ability to get some information that matters. So hopefully the smaller media outlets across the country, including this little outfit here in St. John's, hopefully it will still be part of the media landscape, because without it, we'll be talking about what's going on in Toronto, not what's going on in St. John's, not what's going on in Harbour Grace, not what's going on in Happy Valley Goose Bay, which I think is pretty important.
Preach on. That is absolutely accurate. And we're losing it all across this country. We're even losing it in Toronto. Even Toronto, you'll hear more coverage about what's happening, globally or in the States. News is local, and that's what we're missing. And people get so angry with journalists. I think you were kind of referring to that. So much anger towards us. You guys are fake news. We're trying to tell you what's going on. We're trying to tell you what's happening in your legislature. But that's what's disappearing right now. You and I will get along.
That we will. Jesse, I appreciate you guys reaching out to me. I appreciate your time this morning. I'll stay tuned to your podcast. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for having me on your show.
All the best, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
As Jesse Brown, publisher, journalist with Canada Land. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Very quickly before we get to Lisa on line number 2. Look, I know that he couldn't pronounce the name of the province. I get it. And people say you should be correcting him. But at some point that makes me feel like a school marm. So I get it, and people have a hard time with it. It's obviously very simple. Understand Newfoundland, those. Maybe I should be offering those particular lessons, but I just roll with the punches and eye rolls, whatever it takes. Anyway, yes, he mispronounced the name of the province. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Lisa. You're on the air.
How are you today?
I'm very well. How about you?
I'm not too bad. Long-time listener, first-time caller, nervous as heck, and I almost hung up on the break.
Take your time.
this kind of relates to just the previous caller you had, and you were speaking about holding government to account and using this forum, and that's related to this call, actually. Calling about the situation with the Rocky Brook Bridge out in Central area. I know you've had people on before and you've heard about it. I was listening last week on Thursday. We're involved in that. We've got a cabin there that we've been building for years, going to be our retirement home. When we bought it, we were guaranteed access from the highway, 1.7 kilometers. And then all of a sudden they decide they're going to shut this down. And I mean, we spent a significant amount of money building this place and buying the land with this guarantee. So I was listening to the news, and the Minister, Elvis Lovelace, came on speaking about it. Said wasn't going to replace it, and that there was another access road we could use. It was 20 kilometers long, and obviously he needs to investigate before he speaks of this. This is like an old lagging road from Abitibi, I guess, years ago, grown in, washed out. Like access back and forth through there is not really feasible. You'd need a four-wheel drive vehicle, and in the wintertime, it is part of this groomed snowmobile trail, so it wouldn't be accessible for us in the wintertime. So he did make some comment with regards to maybe he should investigate it, and I would like to invite the minister to try to travel this road to see. I know he's probably, like I say, he's probably looking at an old map, looks, oh, here's a road they can get from here to there. That's not the way it is. So I really wish that he would come in to travel this road to see what it is like.
The pushback that we get from others listening to the program is, they're suggesting that there's an air of entitlement, that, you want $1 million spent on the Bailey Bridge or whatever the case may be for very few people with cabins in the area. But I guess the concern would be the obvious, is when we try to understand what we're getting ourselves into, if there was, as part of the purchase of the land, that there would indeed be this point of access, because if people are considering buying that plot of land, if it was all about the extra, 27 kilometers or something that you're now forced to travel, maybe that would have meant, I'm not buying that. That's too much for me.
We wouldn't have hesitated to change our mind. We would have traveled and been like, forget it. And we're not just talking a few cabins here. We've got an old little town going on, and there's supposed to be more, and there's supposed to be more development further up the road. And even we've got a road committee that's working really hard on this, and I really want to thank those guys for all the work they're doing. They've been putting together proposals for the government, and they had planned on expanding and selling more lots, and they've done a proposal showing that the sale of these lots could subsidize the bridge, could pay for it totally. But it's just like the government is just, and we've got in our contracts, when we bought it, we would have not bought it knowing that, okay, well, this could be closed down eventually. We were guaranteed access from this side, right? So it's just frustrating to have invested so much time and money. And like I said, we're not talking 2 or 3 cabins up there. We're talking significant number of cabins. And when we say cabin, I mean, we're talking, these are people, there's people living up there, and it's going to be like us with their retirement homes, that kind of thing. So it's just really frustrating. So I just had to call. It's been on my mind, been trying to get my nerve up again to call in, but I was like, no, I've got to do it just to get it off my chest. Because I know some people are thinking, well, they just want to drive 20 kilometers. They'd rather go 1.7, which is understandable, but we're not talking about a road.
Right. And, there's another couple of issues that come to mind with this stuff. Like there's plots of Crown land out around the Botwood proposal for onshore wind. And people said, well, they bought the cabin, bought the Crown land, built the cabin, but all the while the government knew that they were going to potentially be developing in that area, but it wasn't disclosed to folks who paid money to build the cabin. And now they're going to be staring down at these massive wind turbines. So the government in particular, if you're going to make a commitment for access points, then you're obliged to do exactly that, because there's always going to be the possibility for the Rocky Brook Bridge or other bridges or other roads to deteriorate over time. But if that was part of their commitment, they need to live up to their end of the bargain, I suppose.
Indeed, and that's why this program is good. We've got to hold the government to account. We just can't have them make these decisions or affecting people. And like I say, this is in our contracts when we bought this land, and just like all of a sudden, nope, not going to do it. So, we just can't say, oh, okay, oh, well, that's too bad, and just let it go. We've got to, fight back a little bit, do what we can, at least. We've got to go down fighting kind of thing.
Fair enough, Lisa. I'm glad you made time as a first-time caller. Thanks for doing this.
And thank you very much for listening to
My
me.
pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. There we go. All right, time for the news. When we come back, we appreciate Minister Harrison's patience as he remains in the queue to talk about the labour market transfer dollars. And then there's a caller also there to talk about the lack of hot water at the rental for 3 weeks. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 7. Say good morning to the Saskatchewan's Minister of Immigration and Career Training. That's Jeremy Harrison. Good morning, Minister Harrison. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well, sir. How about you?
Very, very well. Thank you.
So are we talking about the labour market transfer monies?
We are. Actually, I was listening to the show for the last half hour, so very remarkable how similar the issues in rural Saskatchewan are to the issues in rural Newfoundland and Labrador, I must say. Really kind of exemplifying how the country really is one. So that was very interesting. One of the issues we have been dealing with, though, at the Jobs Minister's table, and obviously I serve at that table. I've been on that table for about 10 years and serve at that table with Minister Jerry Byrne. One of the challenges we have had is that we found out in the last week or so that the federal government had cut the top up to the labor market transfer agreement, about a $625 million allocation that provinces right across the country had been counting on to deliver job training and labor market programming in their jurisdictions. And it's something that was really very frustrating. And I know Minister Byrne has had those frustrations. I do as well in Saskatchewan, and it's something shared by jobs ministers across the country. In that we got notice at the very last minute, obviously in the budget, we had no advance notice from Minister Boissonnault that this was going to be the case. And my understanding is that Minister Boissonnault has been giving indications across the country that he had given advance notice. I can tell you unequivocally that that is not the case. We did not get advance notice of this cut. And we think that it is completely wrong and counterproductive.
A reminder for folks in this province, so the reduction in that transfer monies here this year, there's $142 million that is on the table, but the reduction is in the neighborhood of $16.8 million. Consequentially, some of the support groups that are trying to find people, say for instance with autism or other disabilities, to gain meaningful employment, they've had their operations hampered here. Now in this province, they've said they're going to put forward a 6-month backstop so that we can try to figure this stuff out. What's the plan in your province?
Well, we're working through that right now, and it's a tough question. Our budget reduction was about $17.6 million here in Saskatchewan, and we were counting on that transfer being available. Our third parties, our delivery agencies, were counting on that money being available, so we're going to work with them. We're going to have to make some decisions here, which provincial governments right across the country are. And the real problem with this is that, having been at that table for 10 years, we had a deal with the federal government, and that deal was that we were going to have in place this additional allocation, $625 million, as we worked through and negotiated at that table at the national level, a new program that would both probably simplify and make sure that we had in place resources for these programs to continue. And the fact that it was pulled out without any notice, without any renegotiation, which I can tell you, Minister Byrne has been pushing for, I've been pushing for, that we embark on this process, and the Government of Canada just completely took this funding away, and it's going to have real-world impacts for delivery agencies and partners that governments have across the country.
And forgive me if I'm wrong, but the current structure of this labour market transfer agreement dollars is from 2017, and Minister Boissonnault didn't come out and say as much, but it looks like with this reduction this year, it looks like reductions coming in the future. Not to say it's going to go away in full, but they have pretty much said the quiet part out loud that they're going to put the onus on the provinces as opposed to the continued reliance on the federal government. Is that how you hear Minister Boissonnault's words?
Well, I mean, the problem is that the deal that had been agreed to by everybody, including the federal government, was that we were going to renegotiate the agreement, and in the interim of that renegotiation period, the funding was going to remain in place. That is the central problem in all of this, and any federal representations to the contrary are just not true. They're just not true. So, we're going to have to work through this, and it has put provinces in a very, very difficult position right across the country in having to find a way forward on this and talk about the worst cut you could possibly make if you're the Trudeau government, why would you cut job funding at this point? It just makes absolutely no sense given the quantity of spending that government is embarking on. Why would you cut this? So that really is the frustration.
Well, inside a $535 billion budget, fair ball. And I mean, we're not talking about an insignificant number of Canadians that avail of these skills training programs. Somewhere in the neighbourhood of 1.4 to 1.5 million Canadians use these supports. So that is not insignificant to say the very least. Anything else on that front before we move on?
No, I mean, these are really important programs. I mean, these are programs particularly focusing on some of the more vulnerable people and getting these folks training to get into the labor market and change their lives. I mean, this is really a significant allocation, and $17 million for Saskatchewan is a lot of money. As I know, $17 million for Newfoundland and Labrador is a lot of money as well. You're just not going to find these sort of resources under the cushions in a provincial government budget. So why the federal government chose to cut here really is mystifying to me, and it really broke an agreement that we had between the provinces and the federal government.
I mean, obviously, in this confederation, there's going to be regional rifts. There's going to be rifts between provinces and the federal government. The only standing Liberal Premier left in the country is right here in this province, Andrew Furey. And, of course, we hear from your province in particular and some of your neighbours out in Western Canada about your relationship with the federal government. I'm not going to get you to characterise it necessarily, but one of the hot-button topics for all Canadians, whether or not they appreciate, they enjoy, applaud or loathe the carbon tax, it's a big part of the conversation. In your province, of course, you have said you're not going to remit the carbon tax portion to the federal government. CRA says now they're going to audit your province about the collection of carbon tax. Where are we?
Yeah, no, well, I would have a lot to say about the Trudeau government. I won't get into all of that, but needless to say, we've had a challenging relationship with the Trudeau government. We intensely disagree with the carbon tax we have from day one. We were at one point the only province that had been opposed, and Premier Wall at that point, really I think quite eloquently stated why we were. So, we've maintained that position all the way along, and we are not remitting the carbon tax. The Canada Revenue Agency, very interesting. I'm not really sure whether they have the legal authority to do that. I actually am quite sure that they don't, which is why the Trudeau government has put as a part of their Budget Implementation Act changes to the Canada Revenue Agency Act to try and change that. But anyway, all that to say that we are in this province obviously going to not be remitting the carbon tax, and we're going to continue our fight against the Trudeau government on that front, while cooperating on other areas, though, that being said. And this was one where we really felt we had an opportunity to collaborate on the job training front, in that we have shared interests at the national and provincial levels right across the country on this, and for some unfathomable reason, this is where they felt they should cut and go after the provinces on. Yeah,
I guess it begs the question whether or not the province of Saskatchewan has the legal authority to not remit a federal tax, but I guess that'll all come out in the wash. I appreciate your time this morning, Minister. Would you like to talk about anything else?
No, that probably covers it. Really appreciate it, and appreciate the conversation.
Take good care. Thanks for your time.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. That's Jeremy Harrison. He's Saskatchewan's Minister of Immigration and Career Skills. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi there.
Good morning. I'm just looking for some advice or where I can go. I have a friend who's renting a room. There's 7 people renting in the house, and there are issues. They have had no hot water for almost 3 weeks. We don't know where to turn. I have called Newfoundland Labrador Housing, left a message. I've called Tenancy Board, left a message. I mean, this is unsanitary. This person comes to my house to get a bath, and he can't wash dishes, so he has heat over here. So I don't know where else to turn for them.
So is the person living in Newfoundland Labrador Housing?
No, it's a house, and it has several bedrooms, and is classified as an emergency shelter. So nobody seems to know. I've called the government, social services, because they're all on assistance. And all they tell me is, well, you have to call tenants board, which I have done, and they haven't returned the call as of yet. So isn't that unsanitary for 3 weeks? No bath?
Well, it's on top of inconvenient, yes, probably so. So does a private individual own this house? Or who owns it?
Yes, and it's run by a property manager who really don't care.
So has the property management company given any indication as to whether or not they're going to fix the hot water issue? And if so, when? Do we know anything about where they stand?
No, the hot water issue, it's radiation heat. So in order to have heat and hot water. So there's no oil for the last 3 weeks.
Other than the two entities that you say you have called, I wouldn't know where to put you, because the property management company, how about this? I'll put you on hold here now in a second, and I want you to tell Dave, the company that we're talking about, and let me see what I can find out.
Okay, that's fine, because we don't actually know who owns the house.
Okay, but I'll see if I can figure out that piece of information that's missing. So when I put you on hold, you'll speak with David, give him that private company's name, and I'll chase it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. She's on hold. And let's take our final break of the morning. Do not go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Cyril, you're on the air.
Paddy, I called you back in March. I think it was the 14th, if I'm not wrong, about the Atlantic Standard HVAC.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I remember.
And you told me that day, I asked you 3 questions, and you figured the Justice Minister was going to be on, and you were going to ask them the questions anyhow. He never come on.
No, and at this moment in time, the warrant for this gentleman, and what's his name again? Kalanga, Raymond Kalanga, it's only in Ontario.
Yeah, I know. This is why I'm asking you now. I'm following the story up through Adrian Anna Cowan with CBC. And there's a warrant out for his arrest in Ontario. He's here in Newfoundland, but Newfoundland can't arrest him unless they're requested to do so. By the OPPs from Ontario. I don't understand it. I mean, it's a warrant out.
Yeah, the warrant is not even from the OPP, it's from the York Regional Police themselves.
Yes, yes.
And it only has apparently like a jurisdictional radius of like 80 kilometers, so I don't know what value that is. It's unlikely that the York Regional Police are going to ask for Kalanga to be returned to Ontario from this province, so we're at a stalemate here. So currently, there's no, the issue is regarding unfair practices under the Consumer Protection Act, right? And that's in Ontario. But what it means in this province, we can't find out. We can't even figure it out.
No, but is there any way to get someone on and explain this to the people that got scammed over this?
I can only try. I can't make anybody come on the program, but I'll give it another shot for you, Cyril.
No, I know that. I know you can't make them. But at least you think someone in government, in Justice Department, come on and explain why they can't do anything with them.
Let me see what I can do. We'll renew our invitation because there's lots on that list.
You know, that's all. Because, I mean, right here in Newfoundland, the dealings I had with him, I never met him in person, but he was going under the name of Ray Stevenson. That's fraud, isn't it?
Well, using a fake name maybe doesn't necessarily constitute fraud, but the behaviors of his company does.
Yes. You know, and there was never nothing done here on it.
So Dave is just walking back into the booth. We will renew our invitation to the local Justice Minister, even if he has any authority to do anything about that company and this individual in this province. I don't even know the basic answer to that, but that's something we can ask him directly. No problem there, Cyril.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear the answer from them and the Justice, how he set a company up. But I mean, he had people employed. Sure, he had to be under the workers' comp and everything else.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and he had to have a number. You know, and there's no one saying anything about it. And there was a lot of people here scammed.
Yeah, there's a lot of people left holding the bag. I understand your concern 100%. And I will, as I just said, try to get you some answers, but that's proven to be difficult in the past, but it doesn't mean we're going to give up.
No, okay, Paddy.
I appreciate your time, Cyril. Stay tuned. See if we can help you out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I mean, that's an awful state of affairs, right? People left holding that bag. Man, oh, man. Anyway, let's keep rolling. Line number 1. Lindy, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning to you.
Make this fast now. Is it any truth to the fact that foreign workers their salaries are being subsidized by the feds or provincial government?
In some circumstances, yes.
In some circumstances.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. People think that it's really cut and dry and every temporary foreign worker gets a certain type of subsidy, but it's simply not the case. I've read through it, and there's all sorts of variables included, and it's actually really difficult to come down to a dollar amount for whether it be working in a crab processing plant or working at a fast food restaurant or working as a skilled tradesperson. It's just not as cut and dry as, for instance, the government covers 30% or 50%. It's just simply not like that. And so if there's a specific question like how much is the subsidy for working in a snow crab plant, that's probably a vastly different answer than working at Tim Hortons, is the basic answer.
Okay, but what people are finding now is that like Tim Hortons, McDonald's, whatever, are all foreign workers. And the workers that work there aren't there anymore.
Well, I've asked Minister Byrne this question specifically. I said, what's your role in understanding how companies are utilizing temporary foreign workers? And if it's found out that a local was fired and a foreigner was hired, do you report to the federal government? Is there any action? He said, yes, he does, and that's part of his job. We've asked the federal minister responsible, because if a company is abusing the program, then they should be held to account. Right, because it's very specific. It's only for companies that are unable to find locals to take the jobs. And in some circumstances, it's absolutely true. If you own a fast food restaurant, then you're having a devil of a time hiring. And if that's the case, you should be able to avail of someone who's actually willing to take the job. For many of the snow crab plants, for instance, there is a shortage of people that are willing and wanting to work in some of these plants. And they've got permission. But if it's abused, we should hold people to task 100%.
Okay, I understand that, but I don't understand, like I say, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried here in Cornwall, Kentucky Fried in Deer Lake. I was up there yesterday. All East Indian.
Okay.
All the local workers, there are no more local workers.
I'll just say it one more time. If the company is able to hire local, then they are mandated by law to do it. If they're abusing the program, they should be held to account. They should have to let go whatever staff was hired to replace the locals, and there should be fines in place, because the program is very specific about how it's supposed to be used.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Patty.
No problem, Lindy. Anytime.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, look, if and when there are examples that you see, because sometimes it's difficult to know exactly what's going on. For instance, there is a revolving door at many of these small outfits, like these fast food restaurants, for instance. I know because both of my boys had worked in it. If you're unable to find an employee, you got to be able to keep the doors open. And in some respect, that might be the only program that's of any benefit. But clearly, if someone who's a local has lost their job and all of a sudden has been replaced by someone who's here under the temporary foreign worker program, that's a problem. And those companies should not be allowed to do it or not be allowed to get away with it. And I think we can all agree on that one. There's nothing wrong with going to a business, whether it be fast food or otherwise, and the staff are foreigners. Fair enough. But the problem is whether or not there were people living close by, the so-called local, that was willing and wanting to take that job. That's where the problem lies. And just like many things that we talk about in the envelope of immigration, when people abuse the system as employers, that makes it bad. It makes it bad for everyone. It makes it bad for the entire conversation about immigrants and immigration and the process and the numbers. And that's corporate Canada doing it to us. If someone gets hired as a foreigner, they don't know whether or not a local has lost their job. They're just wanting to get a job. So this is where we have to put the onus back on the corporations, right? Not the foreigners, not the immigrants. They didn't fire anybody to take a job. So some of those operations that do that is just shameful existence. All right, pretty good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program. All of the listeners, callers, emailers, and tweeters. You're all right. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer David Williams, I'm your host Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.